Okay, we're going.
Good morning. Good morning. Sitting there on the back row, I remembered how my dad never let me do that before, so I got a couple of minutes of back row sitting that I got in without getting in trouble. When I think about, I think I have this right, when I think about Cherry Street, I think of Bruce Chowney. Is that right? Bruce was here for all those years. And if my dad had a best friend, I think it was probably Bruce Chowney. I know they really enjoyed being together and going places together and talking. So I grew up seeing my dad and Brother Bruce together quite a bit. Some of you that don't know me, my dad was Brother T.Y. Clark or Brother Buddy Clark. I don't know how many of you remember him. Good or bad, you probably remember. He had a real zest for the Lord, and I think he had a temper too. I may have inherited some of that. But I know he loved the Lord, and I know he loved the Philippine work. I want to thank you all for allowing us to come this morning and talk about the Philippine work. I'm not a preacher. I haven't been a preacher in my life. Brother Cyrus says if I would just move to the Philippines, he could teach me to be a preacher in under 1 year. I've been over there several months, if you add it all together, so I think he's worked on me just a little bit. Also, when I think about the Philippine work, I think of all the people who have, over the years, starting with the Words of Life broadcast, been involved in the work, either actually going there or praying for the work or understanding what's going on in the Philippines. The Mullins family, some of whom are here today. Sister Mullins spent a long time over there, and Earl C.'s been there several times. Over the years, I couldn't list all the people who have made trips there. So I thank all of you for your support over the years, and Cherry Street's support over many years. We all know what Mark 16:15 says. Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation." Now that was a little easier maybe to do back then because the whole world seemed to be the area around Israel. But how do you fulfill that command when the places you're supposed to go are really, really far away? If you dig a hole straight down through Cherry Street, through the floor, you'll come out in the Philippines. It's on the other side of the world. How do you fulfill the command to go into all the world when the countries are that far away? And what about if the borders are closed? What if it's a country that you can't go into right now? And what if you could get in there? What if the people are not friendly towards you? So before I tell you what we're doing in the Philippines, I want to go back just a little bit and tell you how all this began. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to go back too far, but I'd like to start around the year 1520 AD, if you don't mind. In that year, Ferdinand Magellan took 5 ships on an expedition from Spain with the goal of finding a new way to what they called the Spice Islands. There was a little problem with making that trip because Portugal and some other countries had said they owned the routes, kind of like they had copyrighted the route to get around South America and get to those islands. So Magellan said, well, I think I know another route. Now it looks almost the same as their route, but it's going to cut through the tip of South America instead of going around it. And I'm going to say because I went through there, it's a different route. And then I won't get in trouble with the other countries. So he found a little way to get through the bottom of South America. We now call it the Straits of Magellan, through there. And he got through there and sailed up toward Guam and landed in an area we call Cebu, which Cyrus has had a little success. It's planting some churches in that area. It's now part of the Philippine Islands. The king of Cebu liked Magellan, and he and his queen were baptized into the Catholic Church. Magellan brought that with him to the Philippines. That was the beginning of both the Spanish influence and the Catholic influence on the Philippines. But the story doesn't end too well for Magellan. After the king was baptized, he also asked Magellan to go over there and fight some of his enemies and try to kill them. And Magellan went over there quickly to get the job done for the king and got pierced by a bamboo spear and died right there. So that was the end of Magellan. A couple of his ships limped back home, back to Spain. One ship eventually made it back, and that completed the first circumnavigation of the globe. That world that was so big had now just gotten a little smaller. It had shrunk. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. The path to the Filipino world had just gotten shorter for us. For the next 350 years, Spain continued its attempts to make the Philippines part of Spain and colonize it. It built Catholic churches. It built Catholic universities. By the late 1800s, see, we've moved pretty fast already, don't worry, I'm in the 1800s. It was in full control of the islands, and they were now considered part of Spain. One of the things that I found when I was over there, I know a little Spanish, and all of a sudden I found out that some of Brother Cyrus's words were actual Spanish words. Not only did they have an influence, but it actually changed the language a little bit, and some of the Spanish words now become part of the Filipino language. So now it's part of Spain, but the U.S. and Spain become involved in the Spanish-American War. And when Spain lost, the Philippines were made a colony of the U.S. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all the creation. Well, the world was made a little smaller by Magellan, and now the country itself was a little more accessible because it was now part of the U.S. So we could go there. The Filipinos liked the Americans, but they wanted their independence too, like we all do. So the U.S. agreed that they would give the Filipinos independence in 10 years, which would have been around 1946. So you know what happened right before 1946? Japan attacked the Philippines right after they attacked Pearl Harbor. The U.S. was forced to retreat, if you know that story. If not, you can read up about MacArthur. Cyrus and I landed in an airport in Cebu, and there was a big bronze statue of MacArthur as he liberated the people. But we returned in 1945, and we engaged in the largest naval battle in history, when you look at the tonnage of the ships. And we took back the islands. The Filipino people were very appreciative now. Even though they looked at first like we were colonizing the islands, now they were appreciative of what we did for them in saving them from the Japanese invasion. We were true to our word. We still met the timetable, and we gave them their independence. Guess on what day? July 4th, 1946. Our Independence Day and what they now call Filipino-American Friendship Day. That's how the U.S. and the Philippines became such good friends. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation? We can't do that, Lord. We can't get there. Then I'll make the world smaller. Yeah, but we can't get there because it's not part of our country. Then I'll make it part of your country. Well, but the people there aren't really friendly to us. Now they love us. With just that little quick view of history, you can see how God prepared the way, making the Philippine Islands closer, more accessible, and friendlier toward our efforts. But now the work begins. Now we can't complain anymore. We can't give excuses anymore. It's right there before us. The harvest is available. Let me tell you a little bit about the Philippines. It's actually 7,107 islands. That's too big, Lord. You told me we could go there, but now there's too much work to be done. Where do we start? Well, fortunately, there's only about 1,000 islands that are populated. That's still too big for most of us to think about. Okay, well, there's only 11 islands that make up 94% of the landmass. Now it's manageable. 11 islands that are big enough to make up 94% of the landmass. That sounds much better. What about the population? The Philippines are the 12th most populated country in the world. Can you believe that? Just a little group of islands near Asia. It's 12th most populated in the world, with over 100 million people and 50% growth. You understand that? 50% growth since 1990. A population explosion. Okay, so there's three geographic areas. There's Luzon in the north. That's the big island that you might see if you look at the map, and it's where Manila is. Most of you have heard of Manila. A very metropolitan area. I can't remember the population of Manila, but I think it's bigger than New York City. Not sure. So you've got Luzon with Manila. In the middle, you've got 8 or 9 little islands. I said there was, how many? 11? So 9 little islands in the middle called the Visayas. And then at the bottom is one more big island. So big island, some medium-sized islands, and a big island at the bottom. And that island is where Brother Cyrus lives, in Mindanao. Of those people on the Philippine Islands, 80% are Catholic. Now you know why. Because now you know the history of Magellan trying to influence all of those people with the Catholic Church. They may be Catholic, but they're very open to listening to the teaching of the Christian Church. All right, so we finally made it to today, or at least in the last couple of decades. How did the Filipino churches develop in that environment? What happened over there? What's been happening over there? Well, in 1952, boy, we made it from 1565 to 1952 quickly. 1952, a baby was born on the island of Mindanao, and that was our brother Cyrus Isoga. He grew up learning about the Bible in a church similar to our Church of Christ, had the same name, but slightly different than some of the things we teach. And by 1968, Brother Cyrus was already becoming well known as a public preacher and a debater against some of the other, you might say, denominations or leaders of those denominations in the Philippines. In 1968, he had his first debate in a public square against what they called the Catholic Defender. There's the Church of Christ Defender and the Catholic Defender. And they discuss issues and they debate. One man was an experienced preacher with a lot of confidence. The other was 16-year-old Brother Cyrus, ready to defend his view of God's plan. I don't know if he won or lost that debate. He tells me he's won, I think, all of them so far, or at least come to a draw. But his feeling and his confidence was that no one is too young or too old to defend the truth. I'm sure he won that debate too. Years passed, and Brother Cyrus went to a school in Mindanao, a school of preaching. In his second year there, he was asked to debate another preacher who was from, in Spanish, the church is called Iglesia ni Cristo, which means Church of Christ, but much different than our Church of Christ. More of a government-type church over there. His opponent was much better than the first, but Brother Cyrus was known as a debater who would take on any challenge. He finished school. He married Sister Lorna. They had 2 children. They both continued studying at Philippine Bible College. By 1975, they'd moved to a city called Cagayan de Oro, where he lives now. That means City of Gold. And Brother Cyrus tells me he believes it's the spot where the Garden of Eden was, since we really don't know where it is, but I keep discussing geography with him, and I don't think he has that right. He began a little mission there. In 1978, he went and started another little mission in Davao City. Both missions continued to grow. But in March of 1980, Brother Cyrus, who hadn't planned to be a preacher and was still working at the time, didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a transistor radio, couldn't afford one. But a friend gave him a transistor radio and said, "Have you ever heard this broadcast that's just come on the air over here called Words of Life with Brother Robert B. Boyd?" Cyrus began to listen to it. He heard Brother Boyd teach lots of things, talking about Jesus' second coming, about Jesus' reign on earth after he comes. He was so interested, being a student of the Bible, he was hearing things he'd never heard before. And he wrote down the preacher's name, Robert B. Boyd. He wrote down the address. He couldn't hear exactly what the preacher was saying, so he wrote down L-O-R-A, Lauraville, and he mailed off the letter. Somehow it got here anyway. And he began communicating through letters with Brother Boyd. Brother Cyrus began to see facts about the second coming that he never had thought about before. In October of 1980, Brother Boyd said, "We've become close enough friends. I need to get over there and meet you and talk to you." And he took a trip to the Philippines. He took 2 other men with him. Brother Vernon Lawyer, who was my 6th grade teacher and taught me on through high school, became my sister's father-in-law. He took Brother Ronnie Hickman, who I guess is Brother Earl C.'s wife's brother-in-law, making him his brother-in-law also. So we have kind of a connection there. Those 2 went and met Brother Cyrus, and through their preaching and their lectures and their communication, Brother Cyrus became assured now that the teaching was biblical, and he began sharing that teaching with other people in the Philippines. That's how it all started. Because he was teaching some things a little differently, his supporters before said, "We're not really interested in supporting you anymore." And Brother Cyrus had to make a decision: do I stick with my supporters or do I go with what I think is the truth? And fortunately for us, he moved to what he thought was the truth and waited for God to provide the support. Brother Boyd returned in 1981, and the 2 men conducted seminars with about 20 other preachers. By 1982, Brother Cyrus had a new congregation in Davao City. When he was sure that was well-grounded, he went back to his starting place back in Cagayan de Oro and said, "Let's start another group here that believes as we do." In 1983, Brother Boyd came to Cagayan de Oro again to conduct some more workshops and some more seminars. And at the end of the event, they decided that they were going to have an annual lectureship starting in 1983. That was the first lectureship where they got preachers together from all over Mindanao and the southern part of the Philippines. I believe the one this year would make it the 33rd lectureship that they've had every year. And now, from those first 20 preachers, now I think this year the attendance was over 200. Is that right? Near 400. Yeah. Counting everyone that attended. It looked like Brother Boyd and Brother Cyrus had formed the perfect friendship and partnership that simply couldn't be stopped. And there was going to be growth. And in 1986, Brother Boyd died suddenly with a heart attack. Unexpected. It was a shock to the Filipinos who had begun to rely on Brother Boyd and count on his support and his encouragement. You know, that's what they really want more than our support. They need our support, but they want our encouragement. Brother Cyrus just went out on a limb and assured everybody, "Don't worry, God will take care of this. We will continue to have the support from the U.S." He told them God had a reason for the timing of Brother Boyd leaving. Was it to make the church stronger? Was it to make them more self-supportive? He didn't know, but he was ready to move on the way he had handled things in the past. At that time, my dad was serving on the Words of Life Committee, and so he was asked to write a letter to Brother Cyrus in 1987 to just say, "Don't worry, we'll keep things going one way or another." That year, he flew to the Philippines to meet Brother Cyrus and said, "Don't worry, I want to encourage you. Things are going to be going on." He went with Brother Cleo Russell and some others. Over the years, we had several people visit. Brother Earl C., Brother Mitch Embry, Brother Bob Morrow, Brother Robert Gill. And then we had a period of time that Sister Regina and Brother Earl Mullins stayed there for a year to get a handle on the work, to really see what was going on day to day. I've been there for a month, and it makes me want to stay there for a year, but they had a much deeper insight into the culture and the church and what was going on. And they could share that with us when they came back. My dad, however, went back almost every year. He loved to go. He loved to go during the lectureships. He wanted to be a part. He wanted to preach. I don't know if they understood all the English that he said, but they speak very good English themselves, so they probably understood him. And he always tried to pull other people into going. Brother Earl C. went with him several times, a couple of times, I guess. And he's got a lot of stories for me about their trips together. It's amazing to me that people would agree to go with my dad around to the other side of the world. It's even more amazing when they went with him again after they experienced the first time. That was amazing. But once you're there, you get a heart for the work, and you just can't stay away. I hope some of you in the future might be able to make a trip with us. Early in the 2000s, around 2001, 2002, my dad's mind began to fail. His health began to fail. And so I just began to help him with his book work. I wasn't involved in this work. I didn't know what was going on. I opened some of the letters and tried to read them, and I tried to keep the books for him and do some accounting and collect the money and make spreadsheets and make sure that we sent the love gifts to the preachers to help them on a month-to-month basis. But I really didn't know what was going on. Somewhere around 2009, Dad had not been able to go for maybe 4 or 5 years to the Philippines, and we kept getting those letters, and my dad didn't know the names. He would get a name of a preacher, and he'd tell me, we've never supported that preacher. And I'd call Cyrus, and Cyrus would say, yes, we've been supporting him for 10 years. And he just forgot things. And on the other hand, I didn't know Cyrus really well. I'd never met him, and I began to wonder, are we just sending money over there to a P.O. box, and they're just getting it and celebrating it and passing it out to everybody, and there's no real work going on? I didn't know. I heard the stories, but I wasn't sure. So I was going to go over there on a fact-finding mission. That was my job. I'm not going over there to spread the gospel. I'm going over there to find out, is this really a good work or not? So I went over there, probably already making up my mind to be a little critical. And immediately, within a few hours, within a few days, I fell in love with the Filipino brothers and sisters that we have over there. Brother Cyrus and I, for some strange reason, didn't even make plans on how we were going to identify each other in the airport, in a busy airport. And yet, when I got off the plane, I looked at lots of Filipino people, and I thought, wait a minute, how am I going to find out how to meet Brother Cyrus? And out of all those faces, I saw one. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and we nodded and came together out of that crowd. It's just like we knew each other already.
Stephen, you sort of look like Dad.
Well, that's why I keep the beard.
You connected.
He hated beards, if I remember. You made me think. 2 things about beards. One was Jay Witten, who some of you may remember from Portland Christian School, came to Bible camp, Woodland Bible Camp, where we're going later today. My dad tried to get him to shave the beard. He wouldn't do it. And my dad finally made a deal with him that they would play a game of ping pong. And if my dad won, he would shave off the beard. And if my dad lost, he would never say anything to Jay again about the beard. So my dad wouldn't have made that deal if he had not known that he was a good ping pong player. So Jay shaved it off on talent night. I still remember him getting in front of the other people. The other beard story I know of is Stan Schreiner, who some of you knew growing up, dated my sister Patsy. Stan showed up one night for a date at our house. And my dad opens the door, and Stan's got a new beard. And my dad said, no man with a beard is going to take my daughter out for a date. Stan's going, come on, Brother Clark, we were late. Nope, not going to do it. So Stan went inside, borrowed a razor, and shaved the beard off so he could take my sister out. That's dedication. But yes, a lot of people have told me I begin to look like my dad. When Dad died, I mentioned to several people that I wasn't a preacher, and I would be a very unlikely candidate to get involved in this work. But now, after going back in 2010, going back in 2014, now I couldn't stop my relationship with the Filipino people. I also did not want to be in charge of a work by myself. I didn't even want to be in charge. I wanted to help coordinate it. And I didn't want to do that by myself. So Brother Larry Miles had been working with Dad or putting up with Dad in those last few years, taking long phone calls as my dad dictated the newsletter to him and thought that he needed to spell each word as he dictated it. Larry put up with that for many years. I asked him to, would he go on a committee with me to help coordinate the work? He said yes. I ran into Brother Richard Mullins, Brother Earl C.'s brother, and asked him if he would help. And he met with us several times to help coordinate those early days of what we were going to do over there. I just wanted someone to say, Steve, you're making the wrong decision here. You need to rethink it. Or, I don't know if that's a good idea. I wanted some checks and balances. I wanted counsel and the wisdom of several people instead of one person doing it. I also wanted a path for continuance should one of us pass away unexpectedly, so that we didn't have the problems that we've had in the past, as this has happened now a couple of times. Both of them agreed to do it. They both agreed. I wasn't really planning to go to the Philippines. I said maybe we should go sometime in the future. And they both said, I think you need to go now. And we found, just by chance, I'll say, we found a very cheap trip in terms of points. I'd had some Delta points that I'd held for probably 10 years because they weren't enough to make a trip. And all of a sudden they were enough. I took a long trip going through several different stops. So I was able to go there. I was still a little uneasy to continue this, but over the past 2 years, I'm finding out I'm not doing anything. I'm coordinating your support, your prayers, your activity. Larry and I were both uneasy about letting you all know that Brother Cyrus needed a new vehicle. It's like we're always coming to you with requests and needs. But I'm learning my job is just to relay the needs to you. All of the needs may not be met, but at least you'll know what they are. And if you want to jump in there and help, you can. And within a month or two, we had raised enough money to buy Brother Cyrus a brand new used car that was so much nicer than the Toyota that he and I drove all over the island in. I think that was a 95 Toyota, Brother Cyrus, or 98? Nissan, okay. We drove many places with that. It was so hot for me over there, and we're driving in that little car, and I said, Brother Cyrus, don't we have any air conditioning? He said, oh, it's working. I said, no, it's not working. I know air conditioning, it's not working. It was blowing air, but I said, can we find a place to fix it? Yeah, we'll find a place. So we pulled off the road, and I'll still remember a young girl was probably 12, 14 years old. She raised the hood, she got her tools out and her meters, she hooked it up, she pumped the Freon in, and I thought, how much was the charge, Brother Cyrus? I think it ended up being $7 or $8. I said, if I could get her over to the U.S., we could make some real money on air conditioning. And then we had cool air the rest of the way. So you've amazed me at helping with the support and the prayers and the encouragement. Today, from those first 2 churches, there are now, I would say, close to 100 churches with maybe 40 to 50 of them that we're directly involved in terms of support. I'm really surprised how some of the preachers tell us we don't need the support. We thank you for it, but we don't need it anymore. We still want to be associated with you. We still want to send you a report, but we'll do okay with the support. Use it somewhere else. These are not rich people that say we don't need the support. These are not beautiful buildings, although a few of the churches are really beautiful with nice tile floors, some of the bigger churches that we have. These are people who, as long as their daily needs are met, they're saying we can find other ways to provide some support for ourselves. I remember some of the churches I walked into that the pew was a couple of stumps of wood with a 2x4 across. They were glad to sit on the 2x4, not for 30 minutes, for an hour or two, while Brother Cyrus preaches, because he will preach to any length that you give him. He can fit any time period. If it's all day, he'll take all day, whatever you've got. And then they'll stay afterwards and ask questions, what they call open forum. He'll say, now that I've preached, what kind of questions do you have? And he'll take questions as long as they want to ask. I'm surprised at how happy they seem, not having as much as we have. And then I come home and I sit in a pew, and while I'm sitting there, I say, well, there's not an armrest on the right side. Why did they put an armrest on the left side of this seat? And all of a sudden I realize I'm thinking about armrests at a worship service, and they're thinking about none of that while they're there. I keep some Filipino money in my wallet all the time. So when I open my wallet to buy something, I think, wait a minute, $20 for dinner? That could buy a bag of rice that'll last a week or so for an individual in the Philippines. It kind of shocks you. I'm sure Sister Regina feels the same way. Once you live there, you change your mind when you live in a different country that hasn't been blessed the way the U.S. has. I don't know how we're doing on time, but a few more minutes?
Yeah, they do start about Earl Mullen's picture.
Oh yes, that's a good story. One of the things I'm a little embarrassed about with Brother Cyrus and Sister Lorna being here, I said, Brother Cyrus, we have got you scheduled to speak. I can't believe it, but we have actually got you scheduled to speak every Sunday morning, every Sunday night for over 3 weeks. I've even got you on Wednesday nights speaking. And then on Fellowship Week, I've got you on Monday night with a dinner where we can ask all of our supporters to come to a free dinner on the first night of Fellowship Week at Portland Christian School. And you can give a little talk there while people are eating barbecue and having fun. And then I've got you speaking on Wednesday night as the main speaker at the Fellowship Week. He said, okay. Brother Steve, what am I going to be doing on Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays and Saturdays? I mean, if I go to the Philippines and it's a Thursday and Brother Cyrus says, let's go to Dipolog. Let's get over there and meet the people over there. We'll be walking down that street in Dipolog, and from 100 yards away I can hear 50 men who have met and are practicing singing for us to be there. They're there waiting for us. It doesn't matter which day of the week. They'll have a service, they'll sing, they'll preach, they'll have food. And we in the U.S. have become a little complacent in Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. When I went to Dipolog, walked down a little street, I remember that path we walked down, and actually through some backyards with the chickens, and got to Brother Edgardo Parangan's house. And it's a step or two down from the level, kind of like a bi-level would be, but just the bottom part. And I stepped down and went through the door. And what did I see on the wall facing me as I walked in the door? A picture this big and this tall. Now remember, I'm on the other side of the world, in the Philippines, on a gravel road. And here's a portrait of Brother and Sister Earl Mullins, painted by their son, hanging on the wall. I'm looking right at it. I've been in the Philippines for a week or two, and I've gotten accustomed to what the sights and the sounds, but I certainly wasn't expecting to see Brother Earl staring at me. I mean, I have that from high school when I would get sent to the office every day. 3 R's would be in the office, Sister Regina and Sister Retta Tapp and Sister Rita Smallwood, and they would see me come in the office. They'd shake their head. Steve, sit over in the corner. What'd you do this time? And I was just waiting for Brother Earl to come through the office, because his office was behind theirs. And he would come through and look at me and just stop and shake his head. That was enough. As a young boy, he was stern, he was fair, he was gentle, but you hated that stare. I'm sure you hated it growing up, Brother Earl Steve, because he could just look through you and you knew you were caught. So it was both encouraging and a little alerting to see that picture. But to think that they thought of Brother and Sister Mullins with such regard that they wanted that picture long after they had left the islands, still wanted it up there. That was inspiring for me. How can you help us? Pray for strength for Brother Cyrus. He had a stroke several years ago. I think it was 14 years ago now. I can't believe it's been that long. Left him a little immobilized in his arm and one leg, and has a little trouble walking. He doesn't have trouble outworking me when I'm there, though. I'm trying to sleep. He's up at 5 o'clock in the morning wanting to go to the radio station and do some broadcast, and he's up late at night. One of the last things he does before he goes to sleep is drink coffee. I don't understand that, but I guess that gets him ready for the next day. Pray for strength for Brother Cyrus. Pray for wisdom for Brother Cyrus. So many people in the Philippines come to him for advice and counsel. He takes a little bit of abuse from some people who complain that maybe he has become our Pope of the Philippines. And all he wants to do is help and coordinate. We've made stronger bonds and ties with the individual preachers so that they actually feel like they're connected with us directly instead of having to go through Brother Cyrus with every letter. So I think that's helping. There's also problems that come up, and he's tried to become a peacemaker there. There's division that comes up. People want to divide. They want to argue. They want to argue about whether they should use 1 communion cup or 10 communion cups or 100 communion cups. They want to argue about the order of the service. Almost all of our churches over there are very, very close to what we believe. They're premillennial. They believe in baptism for salvation. They're non-instrumental. There's one church where the preacher told me, after he got to know me, he was a little afraid to talk to my dad about this, but he said, "Brother Steve, we do believe in instrumental music, but the problem is nobody in our church knows how to play an instrument. So for right now, we're non-instrumental. But if a guy comes up with a guitar and can play it, we might let him." So that's the kind of unity we want. We've walked into other churches before that actually had instrumental music that weren't really associated with us. And yet they said to Brother Cyrus, "Would you like us to put these away while you're here because we respect your beliefs?" There's humility. There's brotherhood. There's unity. Brother Cyrus always says unity doesn't mean uniformity. We're going to continue what we believe. We're going to preach it. We're going to teach it because we believe it's the truth. That doesn't mean these brothers who think slightly different aren't our brothers also. Pray that our radio broadcast in Mindanao will continue. Those have become the most effective tools for the preachers there to get the word out. They get prospects. They text Brother Cyrus after the radio broadcast. He puts them in touch with preachers, and they follow up from there. Add your name to our newsletter list. I know you probably get a newsletter here at the church, but we've got a newsletter list in the back. Sign your name, and you'll get one at home. We'd love to send you one at your home also. Finally, if you're not one of our financial partners and you think this is a valid work and you'd like to get involved, we'd love to have you send a gift that we use to help pay for the radio, support those preachers to a small extent, to help pay for some of their food. And the last thing is, one of our dreams is to build a school at the Capisnan Church on the 2nd floor where Brother Cyrus can continue his work in training young preachers. That work has gone on and off over the years, but the preachers we see there now who are still steadfast, almost all of them, probably 70 to 80% of them, have come through one phase of that school that we've had over there. And Brother Cyrus usually takes a year or 2 years to train a young man to be a preacher. So we're still looking at possibly building an addition to the church there. Thank you for your support, and I'll close in just a word of prayer. Heavenly Father,